What's up guys, Mike here, and today I actually do not have a personalized intro for you guys. My camera is currently at my parents' house, so we're just gonna skip me talking at the beginning of this video and just jump into things. On an April night in 1993, I sat in the cab of my pickup truck with a rifle in my lap, deciding whether to kill myself. Yes, Dennis Rodman, a man who was once at the top of the basketball world, spent this April night in the parking lot of the Palace with a loaded rifle in his hands, contemplating whether he should go on with his life or to just put an end to this pain. But what caused his pain? What caused a man who seemingly had it all to fall to the lowest point imaginable? Well, to understand what was going through Dennis Rodman's head at the time, we first need to understand Dennis Rodman's story. Growing up as a small kid in Dallas, Texas, Dennis Rodman found that his life would begin with several obstacles that would shape him into the man he would one day become. Because from as young as he could remember, Rodman was left to become a man on his own. His father left his family when he was just 3 years old, with Dennis saying, "Some man brought me into this world. That doesn't mean I have a father." And though his family did love him, Dennis would describe his home life as overwhelming, as living in an all-female household sometimes meant that he was the odd man out. This was especially true in high school, as both of his sisters outshined him and often left him feeling unnoticed. While the two Rodman girls starred in South Oak Cliff High School and won 3 state championships on the basketball team, Dennis barely made the JV team as a sophomore and wound up quitting the team in frustration due to lack of playing time. He remembers that, "I was supportive of what they were doing, but I was kind of in the background and I got teased about it." Because even as a high school senior, Dennis stood at just 5'11" and had limited basketball ability. At times, he would look at his taller sisters and think, "I wonder when it's going to be my time." But he wouldn't grow in high school, not yet. And while he certainly loved the game, he never really showed any true, for lack of a better word, skill on the court. Which meant that while both of his sisters would go on to become all-American basketball players in college, Dennis left high school and took a job as an airport janitor, resigned in his belief that it was his fate to be the loser of the Rodman family. He left his mother's house, even though he would spend months on the road without a home, because he simply did not want to be a burden on her anymore. As he said, "I was a nobody. Sometimes I'd walk around the streets all night, knowing I had nowhere to stay. I was pushing a broom for $6.50 an hour. There was no reason for me to believe that I'd ever do much more than that." And because we know where this story will take us, to that cold pickup truck in the parking lot of the Detroit Pistons home arena, we need to take a step inside Dennis Rodman's head as he mopped floors for minimum wage. The man had watched in high school as his sisters had been the stars of the school while he was pushed to the side. And so while the Rodman girls went to college and again got all of the attention, Dennis wanted for once for his friends to, in his words, think I was a big shot. Which meant that when Dennis saw the chance to steal 50 watches while on the job, he took it. As he remembers, "I didn't make a dime off the watches. I just passed them out, looking for acceptance." Because that's all Dennis Rodman really wanted at the time. And that's all he wanted in the truck in 1993. Acceptance. He wanted people to like him for who he was as a person, and when they didn't, that crushed him. Now, Dennis would be cleared of all charges when the 50 watches were returned to the airport, but of course, he was fired. Which leads us to the first big break in the life of Dennis Rodman, because while he was pushing around a broom and a mop, his body was doing something else. As in the 2 years after he graduated high school, Rodman had miraculously grown 9 inches to now stand at 6'8". Suddenly, when playing basketball, he found that "I could do things on the court that weren't possible for me before." And luckily for him, a girl by the name of Loretta Westbrook would take notice. She saw Rodman's newfound dominance on the court and begged him to try out for the Cook County College team. In that tryout, Rodman was offered a scholarship after the coaches watched him for just 15 minutes, as his basketball potential was clear to everyone around him. And though he would end up leaving Cook College after flunking out, he quickly found a new school to showcase his abilities. Dennis would enroll in southeastern Oklahoma State, a college in a town where people would often shout things at him such as, "Get your black ass out of here," and "Go back to Africa." But Dennis didn't go anywhere, as he says that the easy way to do things is to cop out. That way you don't have to worry about being successful. And successful he was. Rodman would become a 3-time NAIA All-American in college and was drafted by the Detroit Pistons in the second round of the 1986 1996 NBA draft. Playing for a small school, Rodman was mostly unknown at the time of the draft, and he remembers that a reporter asked him, "Who are you?" at training camp. To which he replied, "I'm nobody," straight out of nowhere, because that's who Dennis Rodman believed himself to be. Even though he had become a star in college, he still remembered the time in his life that he was a nobody making minimum wage as his sisters shine. But even though he may have seen himself as a nobody, anyone watching him could easily tell that Rodman was anything but. As a rookie, Dennis averaged 15 minutes per game and was a key contributor off the bench for a veteran Detroit Pistons team that would reach the Eastern Conference Finals. From there, he would go on to develop into one of the best defensive players the NBA has ever seen. In just his third season, he would average almost 10 rebounds a game and help the Pistons win their first ever championship. Detroit would also win the NBA championship the next season, with Dennis taking home Defensive Player of the Year honors in just his fourth year of professional basketball, which meant that at the time, Dennis Rodman was on top of the basketball world. And then, just 3 years later, he would find himself on the verge of suicide. So what happened? Well, for starters, while life on the court was at times great for Dennis, his off-court life was anything but. In his rookie year, he met a woman by the name of Annie Bakes, who he casually dated for less than a year. Then he got her pregnant. The couple would name their new daughter Alexis, and at first everything was perfect. Then the two decided to get married for the sake of the child, and things went from good to horrible very, very fast. Soon, Dennis found that Annie would not allow him to visit his own daughter, and this lack of contact with Alexis weighed heavily on Rodman's mind at all times. But still, he had the game, and as Dennis put it, basketball was always my release from these problems. Until it wasn't, because by the start of the 1993 season, Rodman had seen the Detroit Pistons management break up the brotherhood he had found with the Pistons. From 1989 to 1992, Rodman saw 4 of his brothers, Rick Mahorn, James Edwards, Vinnie Johnson, and John Sally, leave the team for one reason or another. Dennis recalls that our great team was being taken apart piece by piece, and I felt like my life was being taken apart right with it. And to top it all off, Chuck Daly, a man who Dennis Rodman saw as a father figure and thought so highly of him that he used to call him God, was fired. So when you combine all of this with the fact that Dennis was now facing some serious heat from the media, as he was fined by the Pistons for missing preseason training camp, and everything just became too much for Dennis. As he would later say, when Daly left, I think he took some of me with him, and I just couldn't take more shit. Which brings us to that April night in 1993. A night in which Rodman couldn't sleep and went to work out at 2 in the morning to relieve his anxiety. The season was almost over, and the once great Pistons had now fallen to a non-contender that would not even make the playoffs. Which at this point was in the back of Rodman's thoughts, as Annie was now threatening to take Alexis to Europe, where she told Dennis that he would never see his daughter again. And so before he left to work out, Rodman wrote what was seen as a suicide note to his friend Sheldon Steele. And as he walked back to his truck after his workout, the pressures of life built in his head. He thought, there was that much pain. I couldn't continue to be the person everyone wanted me to be. I couldn't be what society wanted an athlete to be. The life I was leading had changed me into somebody I didn't even know. As I sat there, I thought about my whole life and how I was ready to cash it all in. Just pull the trigger, bro. Pass on all those problems. But then these thoughts passed, and instead Dennis began to think, I was two people. One person on the inside, another person on the outside. The person I wanted to kill was the person on the outside. The gun. Why not just kill the guy on the outside and let the other one keep living? And so he left his truck, gun in hand, and at 10 paces, I turned and shot the imposter. Rodman would fall asleep in his truck and woke up to 2 policemen banging on his door, afraid that he had taken his own life, as Sheldon Steele had found the suicide note. And at the time, people wanted to help him, but Rodman would tell everyone, even his psychiatrist, that there's nothing at all wrong with me. He was only fooling himself though, which brings us to the point in the story where Craig Sager saved Dennis Rodman's life. Sager, who we all know recently has passed on, spent 45 years in the sports media. Along the way, Craig touched many lives, but it was Rodman's who he perhaps changed the most. Because after the truck incident in April, Dennis Rodman scared everyone around him when he suddenly disappeared on a night where he was showing clear signs of depression. And so Craig Sager made it his mission to track Dennis down. Sager would find Rodman Rodman on the second floor of the Landing Strip, a strip club in Detroit. As Craig recalled, he saw Dennis and he had the gun. He was going to do it. I told him how stupid that would be. And those words resonated with Dennis Rodman. He put down the gun and the two men talked. They talked about all Dennis Rodman had to live for. They talked about how Dennis needed to live so that he could see his daughter Alexis grow into a woman. As Dennis would later say through Twitter, Craig Sager, thanks for saving my life when I was in dire need of help in Detroit back in 1993. Because it was that night at the Landing Strip where Craig Sager finally got Dennis Rodman out of the darkest parts of his mind. He convinced Dennis that life was worth living, and the two would go on to develop a friendship that lasted until the day of Sager's passing. Rodman would go on to win 3 more championships with the Chicago Bulls, but more importantly, Dennis still lives today at the age of 55, the proud father of a woman by the name of Alexis. And so guys, right before we end this video, I just want to say RIP Craig Sager. The more I read about you, the more I just get inspired to do better in my life. You guys may have seen me wear Craig Sager's t-shirt in one of these videos, so today I'm just going to leave the link to his charity down below where you could buy his t-shirts or just leave a donation for a great cause. Other than that, I just want to say, guys, your life is always worth living. If you're ever having suicidal thoughts, talk to someone, please. If you don't feel like there's anyone you can talk to, I'm also going to leave some links down in the description to sites that could possibly help you out. Other than all of this, have an awesome day, guys. Cue the music.
Hey, what's the move? Can I tell the truth? If I was doing this for you, then I have nothing left to prove. Nah, this for me though. I'm just trying to stay alive and take care of my people. And they don't have no award for that.